everybody. It's Sunday. Wow. So, third day. Yeah, that's 3 days. We've had 3 amazing keynote talks this weekend. Eamon, Mark, Laura, each giving us more insight, unwrapping different elements of our Atkins, our daily duty and church teaching, as well as our scriptural roots. They've unpacked, they've given us insights into the climate crisis and our economic model, the personal and systemic challenges that we face, and those personal responses that we might make. And our workshops yesterday gave us plenty of food for thought, of ideas for action, of solidarity and networks, so that we do not feel we are alone. And all of this held together by the Holy Spirit, the breath of God, the awe of creation, and our realization that we are loved so much of that generosity of Christ can simply overwhelm us. So this morning is time to think and plan. Cue evil laughter. So, I think if my maths is right, we're at 98 days before COP. Those of you that might have been able to talk to me over this weekend know that maths is not my strong point. So, 98 days before COP26, so that United Nations process that we're in. COP stands for the Conference of the Parties. 26 is because it's the 26th one in the series. What does it mean in practice? We've got some great speakers this morning to reflect around COP and what it means. But before we do that, I just want to say, COPs are not like a traditional party conference. They're not like a kind of normal conference at all. The real work of the climate process is already going on. Indeed, it's a little bit late in the day. Every country since leading up to Paris and for many years has already made its commitments. It's already got its plans. They're called Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs. And those plans are all added up, and the maths are done by people much, much cleverer than me, and the scientists and all of those people like Andy, who know what they're talking about. And they tell us whether or not we are on track to be able to reduce our emissions to the extent that we are still keeping 1.5 degrees alive. That was what was aimed for in Paris. Well, it was what was hoped for at Paris. It wasn't actually agreed at Paris, but that's what we're working towards, keeping the desire of not increasing our temperatures by more than 1.5 degrees. We're not on track. That is the reality. The world is not on track for 1.5 degrees. That's why this COP is so important, because this is the moment when we are asked, when we as a world, not just us, we are as a world, set our ambition against our reality, and we are found wanting. And there are the big issues. We have got challenges with Brazil, with China, with Australia, and one other, I can't remember. India. I mean, the Americans are coming on board gradually. Britain is kind of doing what we can. So what is happening in relation to COP? What happens at COP is words are wrangled over. I remember in Paris that elation that an at least was put into a sentence. How exciting. Get your anoraks on, everybody. We know that, I have to genuinely believe that Alex Sharma, as the president of COP, is really committed to that keeping 1.5 alive. But, he's doing it in the face of a Prime Minister that seems more obsessed by PR than delivery, that's trying to speak to the sceptics in his party. And, of course, we have a Chancellor that's just slashed our aid commitments. So, these are the domestic challenges that we face. So, as the President, as the host of COP, we need to be continually getting our messages out to our MPs that yes, it matters what Britain does, because we can't hold other people to account for their ambition if we're not holding of ourselves. It is a big task, but Jesus said, do not be afraid. And so, we might not always feel like singing as we go, but we must not be afraid. So this morning, we're going to hear from 4 different perspectives before we go into our diocesan groups to plan. Jeff is going to, or someone is going to say more about that when that time comes. And I just want to say something, I want to quote something from the Glasgow Action Plan, which a number of organisations, including Catford, through the Climate Coalition, have signed on to. We look for high ambition and stronger short-term action, equitable participation, and climate justice must be at the heart of this COP. That's what we're calling for. So we've got lots of different stakeholders and opportunities that we'll be reflecting this morning. So we've got 4 different sections. We've got 3 young people who are in the room. That is right, yes? Yes. Don't worry, there'll be time for applause later. We've got Lord Deben, John Gardner, who is going to be joining us on Zoom. Yes. It's all seamless, this. It's seamless. You can't see my leg dancing. We have the amazing Andy Atkins, who we heard last night. And we've got Emma Gardner, who's from the Diocese of Salford, who's going to be joining us on Zoom as well. Okay, so 4 great perspectives. And between these 4 perspectives, we'll get some sense not of the detail of COP, but of the opportunities and challenges of the next 98 days and beyond. Bear with us, because we've got some live, some Zoom. Tech will work, I'm sure, because the Holy Spirit is with us. I'm very pleased to have James here to hold my hand, as it were. And so, without any ado, let's get started, and let's welcome Michael Archibald, Michael Chambers, and Anna Marshall. I should have checked that before, but that's right, yeah. Who are from our group of young people. In your packs, we've got a small sheet, and Michael, and Anna are young people who are deeply committed to working for social justice, and I welcome you to the stage to start us off. So give Michael a hand.
I've just finished my 2nd year at the University of Kent, where I served as co-president of the Catholic Society for around a year and a half. Introduction over. The climate crisis is arguably one of the most important issues that young people face in this day and age. We are constantly thinking about what sort of world we will inherit, and what will that world look like when we're the ones in power and we're the ones making decisions. There has been a growing trend in the last decade or so that has caused increasing concern amongst us young people. And it's the fact that more and more companies are shirking their responsibilities when it comes to protecting the environment. What I mean by that is we're seeing companies like Royal Dutch Shell that tell us how we, the general public, can save the planet if we just do what they tell us to do. And then after a moment's thought, you realise the company telling you this was Royal Dutch Shell, the oil company, the same company which on its website boasts about decades worth of experience in fracking. We won't even mention the fact that they're going to go ahead with constructing a new oil field in the west of the Shetland Islands. If you have the time, I highly recommend reading an article in The Guardian called "Shell is not a green saviour, it's a planetary death machine." It's a bit dramatic, but quite true. At this point, the article is a couple of years old, but the information is all still valid. The article speaks about how Shell is attempting to make itself appear like a greener business, and yet behind the scenes refuses to practice what it preaches. To paraphrase one of the more pertinent sections in this article, Ben van Beurden, CEO of Shell, held a lecture in 2019 And in this lecture, he criticised consumers for not eating seasonally, with the example of people eating strawberries in the winter. Unfortunately for us, companies are well aware that we need their products. And as we need their products, we will continue to buy them. And provided we continue to buy their products, they know they don't have to change their ways. For example, if we continue to pay our energy bills, energy companies won't have to change their production model from non-renewable, non-sustainable energy resources to renewable, sustainable ones. Today, I just checked before going up here, 55.9% of our national grid power comes from fossil fuels. And these companies have no reason to shift to greener energy. Another problem we face is the fact that companies take part in what's referred to as greenwashing. And for those that don't know, this is where these companies advertise themselves to be environmentally friendly, or they take part in small environmentally friendly initiatives that don't cost as much, to appear as if they truly care about the planet. The reality being that these companies still take part in harmful practices which endanger our home. It's this sort of performative gesture that has led to the use of paper straws over plastic ones. The reality in this situation is that it's rather unlikely that these straws will actually ever be recycled. This is because they cannot be recycled if they are contaminated with food or drink. If they can't be recycled, they go to landfill. And if they go to landfill, they can't biodegrade, as oxygen is removed at landfill sites in order to stop things decomposing and leaching into the surrounding soil. I'm not saying that we consumers and the general public shouldn't have to be responsible for our actions regarding the climate crisis. Instead, what I suggest is that we don't lose sight of those who truly need to be held responsible, the companies. The companies who, as we have seen in the past, will quietly push back against things like the Paris Agreement because the sanctions or directives are considered to be too harsh on these large, billion-pound multinational corporations. To quote another article, the great tragedy of the climate crisis is that 7.5 billion people must pay the price so that a couple of dozen polluting interests can continue to make record profits. My hope for the future is less of these companies parading around pretending to care. I hope for a sense of morality amongst board members, and I hope for less of these companies like Shell or BP investing in our schools. Lord knows we need the money, just not from them. And so, my friends, my challenge to you all is to think. To think whenever a company tells you that you need to do more. Remind yourself that they are in no position to tell you to do so. My COP26 challenge is simple. Hold them accountable, just as much as they tell us to hold ourselves accountable.
I'm sure everyone agrees I've been very nervous to be up here right now. First, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Michael Archibald. I study at the University of York. I've just finished my second year studying biology. You can't really tell, I'm in Newcastle. I've always been involved with refugees throughout my life, largely through the work of my fantastic parents, who the Justice of Peace Refugee Project have given support to thousands of refugees since it's been going on. Now we have a duty to help refugees. We're the 5th biggest economy in the world, although I'm sure we probably slipped a bit with current estimations. But we've largely made that money through plundering the world, benefiting from the suffering of people, whether that's through actions of the empire or one-day practice when it comes to companies like Shell. Now, the issues of climate change massively affect refugees. We end up with a limited water supply through strange weather. I mean, we've already seen what's going on in Germany and China. That's not good for crop production. That itself limits our food supply to stress on other natural resources. And it's a long-term issue. It's only going to get worse. And these effects will force millions of people out of their home. We're already seeing it across the world. In countries like Bangladesh, who are massively reliant on fish, they're just not catching up, simply. People have to move in order to not only live a better life, but to survive. Our current prediction is around 24 million of the displacements that occurred in 2020 was due to extreme weather. Now, the issue we have is that displacement leads to conflict. There already isn't enough resources for these people, and it's not as simple as they can, get on a plane and go somewhere else. They go to neighbouring countries, which often happen to be poorer. And it's a self-fulfilling problem. We end up with more conflict, which then leads to more climate change, and that conflict, which is largely stirred up by the British government in terms of our arms sales, which I'm sure we can all agree is just horrific. And what's worse is this massive rise of populism we've got across the world. Words like hostile policy, correction, what is that? And the Nationality and Borders Bill, which only recently passed, that's not helpful to the refugee. It's being marketed as a solution, but it's a massive problem. All it's doing is making it harder. And this isn't a new problem. Climate change has happened naturally in the world, but what we're seeing now is a man-made climate change. The Dust Bowl in America was natural climate change, largely exacerbated by unsustainable farming practices. But that led to the biggest movement of people in American history from the rural south into the cities. 2.5 million people moved, and they were taken advantage of by cities. They were used for cheap labour, and that's happening again. And even looking in early history, in 378 AD, the fall of the Roman Empire, it was largely a mismanagement of a refugee crisis that caused it. Climate change stopped food security and forced the Goth people in Eastern Europe to move. And the Roman Empire, the great mighty Roman Empire, could not deal with it. They fell. So not only is it in the interest of refugees, but it's in the interest of ourselves as a human civilization. Now, my challenge to this conference, we're blessed to be in a room of people who are very like-minded. I'm sure we all agree on many social issues. And there's a quote by Marcus Aurelius, the Roman Empire, that I find inspiring, and that is, every day you wake up, you must go to work as a human being. And I started saying that as I woke up, and what does it mean to be a human being? But it means to care for others, to reduce that suffering. And so my message to everyone here is, go to work as a human being. Do what you can to help others and reduce suffering. To the government, I ask them to step up first of all, and I'd probably like to say a few more things to the government. But to help refugees out of duty, and not through some stupid PR campaign that I'm sure Johnson and Cummings will have cracked up in their bathroom. But to actually create proper policy, to consult with not only organisations that help refugees, but refugees themselves. They don't have a voice. We need to give them a voice, because they're the ones who will mostly know about the issues affecting them. And my challenge to the church is largely to keep doing the work we're doing supporting refugees, but to engage with populism. I don't think it's enough to condemn. It's about education. People come up with populist and nationalist ideas because essentially they're told that's the solution to their problems. So I really would like to see the church actively engaging and talking to people and just giving an education on what's actually going on, and not just being pumped out with the Daily Mail or the Sun. So thank you for listening.
My name is Anna Marshall. I am a sixth former, and I'm going to speak about my perspective as a student on the climate crisis and our response to it. Everyone agrees that education is a vital element of the response to the climate crisis. I thought that it might be useful to give you an insight into how I feel I have been educated on the climate emergency. Firstly, I think it is important for you to know that my generation knows about the climate crisis. Many people assume that those young people who don't attempt to respond to the climate crisis don't know about the climate crisis, and that's blatantly not true. We know and we understand the climate crisis perhaps better than older generations because we've grown up with the science. We're being told about it, being worried about it, and being taught what we can do to help. The climate crisis is on the news and we do speak about it at school. So what is it that could possibly be lacking from our education that can stop my generation engaging with the climate emergency? There is obviously something crucial. In my experience, it is the detachment of the education we receive from real life. I am taught that single-use plastic is bad in class, that when it finally breaks down after hundreds of years, it leaks damaging chemicals into the surroundings. The next minute, I am in the dining room, and all my friends are buying plastic packaged food. Maybe it's the only option if I want a glass of water to buy a plastic bottle. I am told mass-produced meat is bad for the environment, and yet it is served day in and day out. I'm told that I shouldn't buy things I don't need or won't use, and yet every day the real world advertises a new type of phone or gadget that's slightly different to the last. It is as if what we are taught in the classroom about climate change doesn't actually matter. It's not relevant in real life. There is no holistic education. There is only so much anyone can be taught in the classroom. There is neither a sustained message for change to help the environment, nor a consistent message. I suppose it is the same reason why so many adults dismiss climate change. It's easier to do what everyone else does, and it feels safe. The example we are set is one that doesn't change. Why should we have to be the ones to change? Why shouldn't we trust the adults? Surely they know more than us about the world. People my age and younger are simply not the solution. We can't vote. We can't work like an adult. We don't have the same amount of independence. We are reliant on adults. In school, it's harder to work for the environment than not. There's always the underlying fear for schools that climate activism is party political, which of course it's not. There's also the opposition from big companies, such as school food caterers, which have been taking advantage of the lack of funding in state schools. They consistently put profit above the environment. Is this what it is to be successful? Why is this allowed in an educational setting? They have just as much impact as anything a teacher can say in a classroom about climate change. Environmental messaging is just nowhere to be seen. I think perhaps the best thing about my generation is that we're not actually afraid of change. We want to do things. We're open to new ideas. And this is what causes the frustration, a feeling I think many of you are familiar with. We need the help, but for most people, support for environmental action is not there in school, or at least not visibly there. Schools can't be expected to change things, or be relied on as the only place of environmental education. That has never been the case. Everyone knows education extends beyond the classroom. There are a lot of strong emotions about climate change for young people. We feel scared, we feel anxious, we feel hopeless, we feel frustrated, and we do feel angry. Equally, as much as we're taught to care, we are encouraged to dismiss the climate crisis. There are more important things, such as exams, getting a job, and achieving that magical thing, success. If anything, the current education system teaches us to be selfish and short-sighted. There is something systemically wrong. The world prioritizes money and power, although people disguise it behind the term success. We built a politic of quick fixes and complacency. This is the example young people are set, and this is an impossible way to deal with the climate emergency. I think a cause of this lies in what we value and how we measure progress. Right at the roots of our unfounded complacency is the economic myth that we are constantly getting better. I'm talking specifically about GDP, gross domestic product. This is an example of the real world ignoring the climate crisis. It's not even a matter of misusing the system. GDP was designed to do this. We're constantly being told that the more money we have, the better we're doing. How then is our environment being destroyed, and yet our GDP is still increasing? We're growing in a way that I believe has nothing to do with real progress. Apparently, we can be successful even as we destroy the planet. At Pentecost, the bishops of England and Wales wrote a letter to all young people in Catholic schools. I'm afraid I don't think it was heard by all young people in all Catholic schools, but I do know it was written for them. I'd like to read part of it to demonstrate the call to climate activism that I believe has the power to change hearts, if only it is a sustained and consistent message in real life for young people. There must be a new global understanding of our world, where nations recognise our common responsibility for the dignity of all people and their rights to sustainable livelihoods and freedoms. Isn't that fantastic? This seems more like the success I want to aim for. The perception of success otherwise sold to us is deeply flawed. My question to you, to the church in general and to the bishops specifically who wrote this letter, is why are we still buying into this flawed idea of success? My challenge for COP26 is to change the world's idea of what success is. Thank you.
Michael and Anna, thank you so much. I think you can tell by the warmth of the applause just how much your words have struck home. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you all so much. And yeah, just fantastic. Lots and lots there for us to just reinforce absolutely what we've already heard. And it's so important to hear your voice as the people whose future we hold in our hands and are letting down. So thank you. So to continue on our session, I know there was a lot already in there, but people will take it into their groups to reflect. We're going to slightly reorganise our schedule, because we still have someone waiting who's not arrived on Zoom yet. But to continue the COP challenge, the challenge both to us and to the whole process in terms of, from a perspective of national churches, I want to invite Andy Atkins back up, who's going to reflect on the way in which faith groups and churches, but perhaps in particular, can become more engaged in political mobilisation for COP26 and to how we can untap more of our potential. Andy, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I will end up very much talking about COP, but I want to set it in the context of the wider work that churches have been doing and will need to continue doing, however brilliant the outcome of COP. And it's important to remember that, even if we get some absolutely brilliant decisions from COP, at that point they will still only be words. It will require the government and civil society to implement them. So it's important we see COP as an incredibly important milestone, but only a milestone on a continuing journey. The world does not stop, however brilliantly, at the end of COP. I'll talk very briefly about some general observations I've got, which I hope will help summarise some of the richness of conversation you've had here. There are so many good ideas flying about. Let me try and crystallise some of those down. Then, but not usurping your role later, that's very much your business, I believe. I'm just talking about as one issue of COP and churches. Then it's about practical action and advocacy, things we should be doing and churches are doing. Get really practical about some key things that we can be doing. Then I'll come to this unique opportunity of COP. So some observations, first of all. As I said last night, actually, in response to the question, I'm actually really excited about how far the churches have come since Rio. For those of you who don't know, the Rio Earth Summit in 1992 was what launched the UN Framework for Climate Change, which this is a COP of. This is the 26th Conference of Parties for the UN Framework for Climate Change. You understand why people call it just COP26 conference, but that's what it is. It's the 26th conference related to that convention that came out of the 92 Earth Summit. Okay? We've come a long way since then, but my goodness, we should have also gone faster. Next thing, practical action versus advocacy. I don't think anybody in this room would be convincing, I hope not, at least, that it is okay, it's more than okay to try and influence politicians to be advocates. But I do hear debates going, is it more important to go through the politics, or is it more important to do something practical? My view is it has to be both. It has to be both. I mean, each one of us will have their preferences. I'm first to the barricades to start shooting, given half a chance. And I need to be reminded of actually going to do something now and again rather than shout. We all have our preferences, but at the end of the day, if we don't take action ourselves, actually we lack the credibility to tell politicians what to do. If we just go and tell them what to do, we're not doing anything, that lacks something. It's absolutely right that we do it out of integrity. But if all we do is the practical action, that's good, it's the right thing to do, morally correct that we act, but we're missing a trick. Because we don't build on that practical action to say to politicians, look, we're doing this, what we can. Now, can you do what you can? We're missing a trick. Why would you want to do that? You add value to your practical action by advocacy on top of it. Third point, environment is not just climate. I started the climate change program at TFO. At that point, no other Christian organisation or big development organisation, in fact, was working on it. So, in a way, I take some of the blame here. But it's not the only thing with the environment. And the point came up yesterday about nature, a question to Christine. 2 weeks ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said, we will not solve the climate problem without solving biodiversity loss, and we will not solve biodiversity loss without solving the climate problem. They are intimately linked. I'm absolutely with you guys, and I hope you heard me last night, we have to get off fossil fuel right now. But actually, the science is also showing that fossil fuel is the biggest single cause of carbon emissions. But after that, it's land, and land use, and land clearance, and food, and farming. And a recent report shows that if we were to restore much of the land, and actually some of the sea meadows as well, sea grass, believe it or not, that could make a 30% of the contribution to cutting greenhouse gases that we need. It would also, of course, rewild a whole load of habitat all around the world, which would be brilliant for nature too. So there are solutions in nature for climate change, as well as solutions in climate change for nature. And for the first time ever, in my understanding, I've been monitoring these talks for about 20 years. I wasn't at Rio. I'm a bit younger than that, but not much. For the first time ever, nature is formally on the agenda of this COP. And it's not a nature COP, there's a completely separate biodiversity convention, which also incidentally came out of Rio. But for the first time ever, nature is on the agenda for this COP. That tells you something. They're intimately linked, and we have to understand those links. I'll tell you more about that later if you want. Ongoing coordination. You will have heard a multitude of brilliant things that different organisations are doing. And it's fantastic. I rejoice in how far the churches have come in engaging in this issue. But we desperately need better coordination. Because if you're not confused at the end of this week, there's something wrong with you. Because you will have heard so much, and you'll be thinking, oh my God, what do I do? How do I know which one of these things to do? That's more. There's so much going on. And we desperately need better coordination. Now, there is a body that does this that I'm intimately involved in. But it's called the EIN, the Environmental Issues Network of Churches. It includes the environmental leads of all the big agencies, Capital Christian Aid, TFM, and the denominations, Catholic Bishops' Conference, Methodists, and so on. It meets quarterly. We must demand of our organisations that they play a serious role in that and seriously coordinate as we go forward. I'm not criticising it, we've all been doing our best, but I think getting the best out of all the activity that we're all doing will require much better coordination in the future. But however much you coordinate, organisations will still need to do their own thing. Of course, we're not saying anyone's got to do one thing only forever. But when it comes to COP or other peak moments, it's so important we decide one thing we are going to do together in order to get cut through, in order to convince the government, convince the churches, make it simple for people to do the right thing. So we will always have peak moments where we need to act together, and COP is absolutely one of those. Let me turn to practical action. As I said, there is so much going on, but my strong recommendation, if you belong to a church, is if your church is not already part of one of these church greening schemes, then one of the most useful things you can do in the next couple of months is start the discussion and get your church to join. It could be Live Simply, which is run by Catholic for Catholic churches in England and Wales. It could be Eco Church, happens to be run by my organisation, but it's very much a collective effort for churches in England and Wales. Or it could be Eco Congregation, which is for Scotland and also for Ireland. Okay? There's only 3 schemes. We work closely together to provide practical support for churches to deal with climate change and nature and pollution and resource use and so on. Okay? They're holistic. Deals with climate, but a lot more than that. Between us, we have nearly 5,000 churches are now registered, according to my calculation, with one or other of those schemes. And there's huge advocacy potential in that in the future as well, to say to government, hey guys, there's 5,000 churches making this kind of commitment, what are you going to do? I'm going to plot with Christine about that later. Then I just want to mention 3 other schemes which are cut across these in the sense of dealing with very specific issues which we've touched on here. Right Now campaign by Operation Noah is very much about helping churches and denominations and church institutions to divest from fossil fuel. So whatever else you do, get your church to join one of these greening schemes. But on top of that, if you're really into fossil fuel investment, that is your campaign. Then there's Green Christian's Sufficient Living Programme, my words, not theirs, called Joy in Enough. This is so important as we have to deal with sustainable consumption and increasingly with climate anxiety and grief. What does that look like? How does the church respond as a pastoral concern? That's where to go. And if you're interested on nature, the link between nature and climate change, just so happens it's my own organisation, the sort of Christian nature community out there is now gathering around something called Wild Christian, online community to do stuff practically, to advocate, to enjoy God's gift of nature, but then respond to that with action and so on. Okay? Let me come to COP now. It's a unique opportunity in so many ways for the churches everywhere. It probably doesn't need saying, but just to emphasise, this is the first time this COP has been in the UK, the climate COP. It could well be the last. There may not be a UK next time it's our turn. Who knows? It's the first time nature has been formally on the agenda. It's one of the government's 4 priorities for this COP is nature, so-called nature-based solutions. And of course, we are UK. We are churches in the UK. An amazing opportunity for us as civil society to influence. We have actually worked together as churches very closely. Christine's been incredibly supportive of this as from CAFOD, to come up with the one thing we're asking all churches to do in the run-up to COP. It's called Climate Sunday. It has the backing of all major denominations, Christian Aid, TFN, CAFOD, Operation Noah, Green Christian, or Russia. We're all part of it. We have, indeed, we want to coordinate, come up with one thing. What we're asking churches to do is hold a service of worship, which they call a Climate Sunday. You can pick any Sunday you want. Frankly, you can pick Thursday night if you want. Call it a Climate Thursday. We don't mind. But in that, look at the theology, look at the science. We all here may think we get it, but there'll be loads of people in our churches who are of goodwill but still don't really understand. You made a very good point. One of the articles earlier, that there has always been human-induced climate change. No, sorry, there has always been natural climate change. That's so flawed, so many people. They think we're saying that never happened. Well, of course it happened, otherwise we wouldn't have had an ice age. So just a simple explanation of what's the difference between now and then helps so many people break through all this. Okay? hold a service, and in that service commit to taking practical action as a church, which could look like, oh, we will join Live Simply then. Or if we have joined Live Simply but not yet got an award, we will commit to trying to get that award in the next year. Take that practical step, not now, but for the future. And then speak up. Sign the Time Is Now Declaration, which is a joint civil society declaration calling on the government to get back on course with the UK carbon targets and to get off fossil fuel. That issue again. Okay, it's up on the website. If I take you to, that's what the homepage of Climate Sunday will look like. It's very, very simple. You've got resources there for all sorts of traditions on worship, on commit. So the commit bit will take you straight to Live Simply, Eco Church, Eco Congregation Scotland, Eco Congregation Ireland, whatever is most appropriate for you. And then speak up. The speak up will take you straight to the Time Is Now Declaration. And you can sign that as an individual, and you can sign it as a church. And what we're calling on is all Christians to sign it, of course. But get your church to sign it and say what church they're from. Because in the run-up to COP, we will be holding a service in Glasgow on the 5th of September, where we will be presenting to the government all those who've signed it so far. But when COP comes, 2 months later, we will give them an update. So we're planning to present to them at COP all of the names of the churches that have committed, all the commitments that have been made, and all those who've signed up, as an act of witness and also encouragement, if I can put it like that, for the government to do what they should do. So that's the one thing we're calling on all churches to do. Whatever else you're doing, do this. And I'm really indebted to Bishop John from Salford, because I think it's the first Catholic cathedral I'm aware of to hold Climate Sunday. It's been fantastic. So your environmental leaders are behind this as well, I say to you. So very, very briefly then, I've got loads more information I can give you for those who want, but that's what I would do. Get the church involved in Climate Sunday, because it will speak now about COP loudly to the government, but it will also get you involved in something that can take you forwards afterwards in a comprehensive way. Okay? And then if you're interested in nature side of things, I've got loads of I can give you on that, but that's not the main subject here, but it's something that people are increasingly getting into as they have noticed actually the connections between the two. How's that?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Andy, that was a great overview, really, really simple, kept us focused, and I love the idea of being a wild Christian. Wow, I'm thinking furious. Sorry, couldn't resist that one. Great, and since Andy just finished by the end by making a reference to Bishop John and Salford Diocese, we're going to move on now to hear from Emma Gardner, who's joining us by the great wonders of technology. Thank God for James here next to me. So, Emma, can you hear me? Emma, just give us a thumbs up. Hello. Well, welcome. So you're very, very welcome, Emma, to the National Justice and Peace Conference. We've had a very busy weekend, and we're all reflecting on COP. So I'm just going to introduce you to the group. Emma is joining us from the Diocese of Salford. She leads on head of environment. I love the fact that a diocese has got a head of environment. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Emma, you're going to reflect very much about what churches locally can do in relation to the COP challenge, which is brilliant. So we've had other speakers that have reflected from different perspectives. I think you might have just caught the end of Andy there when he was digging you up there in Salford Diocese. So I think you can see some of the hall. Is that right? Hall, give her a wave. Okay, so you're very welcome. And so that's fantastic. So Emma, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry I can't be there today. I had to do something yesterday. But I believe you've had a lovely conference and the agenda looked great, so I hope I can add to that. And it wouldn't presume that I'm going to say apologies for the dogs, whichever room I'm putting them in, they've been really naughty today and barking, so they might support my presentation, hopefully not. Okay, so I'll just share my screen. Could you allow share screen, please? Is that okay? Can everybody see that okay? Yeah, lovely. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I'm sorry about that. Let me just try and close the door once more. I need to start scratching them. My own fault for not taking them out this morning, telling you that. Okay, so yeah, I'm head of environment at the Diocese of Salford. Very, very fortunate. It's a lovely role, way in which I can live my faith every day through my work, which is really lucky. The focus I want to, on this slide actually, we do know that things have changed and there are some things we've lost and we can't get back, and we have permanently damaged and altered the planet. However, the point here is that there is time to take action, and we know that this is a very important year, very big year, a year we hope of ambition, and then also the activities and the things we can deliver after November, and let's not forget about the October Biodiversity Conference as well. So there is still time to act and take action, and that is absolutely key. And we've seen a lot of response already, not just in the Diocese of Salford, but across all the dioceses in England and Wales, and I do have a slide on that. What I'm showing here is that it's not just my voice. Bishop John has shown great leadership, and we have seen a response from across the diocese. I asked for some case studies. Ed Dickey and I are working on a project with the bishops where we produce a presentation on case studies across dioceses across England and Wales, and these are just some quotes that I heard from our parishioners and from our school children, and it kind of really gives me a lot of hope and desire to keep working hard as hard as I can, knowing that there's a real passion and understanding across the diocese. And as in the introduction, the diocese has responded by creating an environment team. I am head of environment. I joined in November. It's a new role. We hope that the diocese will also open this role up to more dioceses will have a head of environment. But I'm really lucky because I don't work on my own. Steve Burrows, who works with CAPO 3 days a week, works with me 2 days a week. So we have a team, which is wonderful. And we work closely with other members of staff in parishes and schools, but also with environmental leads across the diocese and other networks and groups. It's all started for us with the key work, I would say, in 2019, when Bishop John wrote a letter to all the parishes and all schools, asking them to take action on climate change and to think about what they can do, no matter how small. And we can see here in the 2 quotes that parishioners really listened to that, and from the evidence that I've collected and the case studies from meetings I've had, I can see that that call was answered and there are actions that are being delivered. And we've got those throughout our schools and through to our parishes. Bishop John, to lead by example, has given over on where he lives at Woodland Hall part of the site to the Laudato Si Centre. And that's to lead by example, saying, I've asked my parishioners and school children to do something, I'm going to do something. So in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the old coach house and former stable block, which is in serious disrepair, and we received planning permission in January to convert that into the physical building of the Laudato Si Centre. And that will be a centre which will be for all faiths and none, to support and inspire people on their journey so they can begin or support their ecological conversion, both in their own lives and in their communities in which they live. Now, the work we've done already has been happening in the wall garden, which you can see in the bottom right-hand of the slide, and then also where the text is written. We have been doing lots of things in the wall garden already. We had an eco-conference with our school children. We planted an orchard. We planted a memorial forest. We've had school programs, and we've had parishioners come and visit us to talk about activities that you can do. And more importantly, in lockdown, because lots of our activities are planned, and then in lockdown we've not been able to do that, we created resources for schools to take environmental activities home with them during lockdown. So the Laudato Si Centre, that kind of that feeling, the vision for the centre was still being delivered through the activities that we were asking schools to take home, to send their children to take home. So we have had a lot of activity already, but most importantly, we've got a lot of work that we will be doing. So this year we planted, during lockdown, we planted a forest garden, and we have recreated the space to, we've got an outdoor classroom, we have polytunnels and greenhouses, and we've created a space where people can come and learn, where they can contemplate, reflect, where they can share stories and they can take action. And more importantly, we're trying to connect with existing good practice that's happening all across the parish, so where we can learn from each other and share what's happening. And we'll be I think it's September, we'll be launching a new programme, and we'll be building in activities to align with season of creation, and then in the run-up to and post COP26. So there'll be lots of activities that we'll be doing there. Now, I am really fortunate because the work I'm doing already builds on such great work that we're seeing across the parishes. And I've got a couple of pictures here on the left, which is some great work that we've seen with Joe Howson. He's working with the RSPB on a soup conservation project, and hopefully Joe will be able to share in the forthcoming months more information about that, because it's been very successful. And he also has a League House Centre for Mission Awareness, working with Mark Rutherford, who I believe you've heard from this weekend. And that's kind of hosts mock UN summits, climate summits, and school programmes. But there are also lots of things happening across our parishes, things from building community orchards, eco-liturgies, eco-groups, and on the right-hand side here we provide resources for Lent, such as Enviro-Lent, and each of the kind of resources shows actions that you can take, but also who are already doing certain actions, so examples from parishes. And each week we have an eco-thought for the week that goes across the newsletters in the Diocese of Salford, and it builds on the readings for the day. And that started in Lent, and we got some really good feedback, and we're carrying that on. We've also held climate services and some climate Sunday masses as well. So the parishes are really listened to the call that Bishop John made in 2019. But the majority of some of the great work we've seen is in our schools, and they really are showing us the way. And I'm very lucky, I get to visit lots of schools as part of my role to see what they're doing, from art therapy in the environment to poems, writing, eco-clubs, wildlife gardening, working with and for nature. And one of our schools, St. Peter's, has a social action on climate change work. And they did a peer-to-peer climate education day with a feeder school, and also worked with Andy Burnham, Greater Manchester Mayor, on the Green Summit a couple of years ago. But what's been really impressive for some of their work is they've been working with trainee teachers at the University of Manchester to talk to them about why they should be teaching about climate change and what that teaching may look like. And that work is expanded to them being asked to present to school governors from across Greater Manchester. So they really are kind of taking up that challenge to do something and take action and leading the way, which is wonderful to see. I mentioned before about the work NJPN and I did, and there's some examples here from parishes across the diocese in England and Wales, and these are the case studies that we collected. Now I can only show a few here, we've got lots back. It's wonderful to see the great work that's happening, that has been happening and is planning to be happening. And we'll be working with the ecological conversion group so that the case studies can be given as examples on the Journey to 2030 platform. So hopefully you'll get to read and see some of these in the next few months. And I'm happy for these slides to be shared so you can read them in more detail before I move on. So I just kind of want to talk about the Gardner's Creation project that you may have heard about. It's a big year this year, as we've been talking about. And the Gardner's Creation project started in December 2020, and the resources will be issued, will be available in October, just before COP26. The Gardner's Creation project is being developed to be implementable at the diocesan level, but will include activities for schools and parishes. It's a 2-year pilot case study that's been based in the Diocese of Salford and has 4 work streams. The first work stream is looking at a theological underpinning, what does decarbonise look like for a diocese and how that kind of cascades across the diocese. And the next work stream is looking at what does that look like? How do you calculate a carbon footprint? How do you look at what environmental opportunities and impacts you're doing? How do you develop strategies to support this? And then what does a decarbonisation pathway look like if we know where we are and we know where we need to get to? How do we get there? The third work stream is based on comms, communications, like behaviour change initiatives and ideas. And then the fourth work stream is a new, just recently got additional funding, is looking at how we can recruit and train our school children to be leaders in their school, so they can be the voice and encourage their schools to make that transition to a more sustainable institution. All of the work that we will do will be shared, and we're working in collaboration, and will be available on St Mary's website and the Laudato Si Centre website, which will be launching in September. We can show the collaboration here. The project is with the Diocese of Salford, with St Mary's University and the Laudato Si Research Institute at Campion Hall, University of Oxford. We're working with the diocesan environmental leads, and I think it's about 17 of the dioceses now have an environmental lead. We're also working with the Ecological Conversion Group, Church Marketplace, and Tyndall Centre Manchester. They're helping us set a science-based target for the diocese, and we'll be providing a methodology on how to do this. This can all be shared, and then other dioceses can think if they want to follow the guidance that we've been provided. The Guardians of Creation project will look at how we support that big structural change at the diocesan level, but working with Journey to 2030, that will support community action, and I have a slide on that in a second. What's really important about the work we're doing is building on that good practice that's already happening, and also working with existing frameworks, so working with Live Simply, but also then looking at how that fits into the Laudato Si Action platform, which we should be getting more information about in the next coming months, and we'll have a much bigger launch in October, I believe. The first guidance has been issued and it's available on St Mary's website. I won't spend too much time on this, but it's really important just to show what the quality of the reports are and how they are transferable across England and Wales and further. So we've been talking with Bishop Nolan and conferences in Scotland. The first report looks at how do we decarbonise our building stock, and we've presented a framework which is on the right hand side, which is again providing that support for all the dioceses to follow. This is just a kind of work in progress. The websites are under construction, and I think John Pollock is at the conference this weekend and will hopefully be able to provide some further information. But basically this is like the community action, the parish resource. We'll show some of the case studies that we've collected, but we'll also be able to show you what kind of things that you can do as an individual or in your parish, and we'll provide guidance and support to help you take those actions. So there'll be more information coming if you sign up to the newsletter, which is here on the website, and again, happy to share my slides. You'll be able to find out when the website will be launched. And I just wanted to put this slide because there is always a worry about funding. In my eyes, it's funding is difficult, but not doing anything is going to cause more problems. But we are actively looking at that and partnering with people within the diocese in England and Wales to see about how we can collectively support funding to decarbonise and become more sustainable in the activities and actions that we take. I think it's one of my last slides now, and kind of just to emphasise how important this year is and how fortunate we are that we have got such a lot of good work to build on, but we know we need to do lots more. And hopefully we will see some real ambition over the next couple of months in the run-up to COP as more commitments are made. So I guess just to finish, it is about taking action. We know that, and what we do today, our actions and decisions really matter. And if we do fail to act now, we will be unable to do the consequences of our failure. And I think that's something that drives me every day. So, thank you very much.
I'm Christine, I'm the chair. I should have introduced myself to you, sorry. I don't know if you heard the applause, but I want to give a big wave, please. Hey, can you see that?
That's lovely. Wave like
And thanks. It's like being at a disabled conference. Fantastic. Well done, and thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and it's brilliant that the technology has worked. And we're sending you all our very best wishes for Salford. And if you were here, I'm sure you'd be mobbed by lots of people with lots of questions, but don't worry, we'll make sure that your website and your email address is available.
Happy to just send emails, very happy to help and take questions. Sometimes I'm a bit slow getting back, but bear with me, I will get back to you.
No worries at all. It's great to meet you, and thank you so much once again for joining the JMP conference. Pleasure. We had hoped that Lord Deben would join us this morning, but we haven't quite been able to work to make that connection, and which is rather disappointing. But I would want to flag to you the work of the Climate Change Committee, which he's the chair of. And although it's an independent kind of government committee, but it is very much a sort of thorn in the government side in terms of continuing to pose challenges and flags. And their work is really excellent. So it's a shame that we haven't been able to hear from him this morning, but I'm going to do a chair's prerogative and put it all here. We've heard so much already, from our inspirational young people through to Andy's oversight and what Emma's been doing in relation to a particular diocese. So wherever you're from, whether it's national, local, whether it's young or old, whether it's now or the future, there's lots of food for thought there. Some fantastic kind of inputs that we've heard.